Okay, so this title isn't exactly the best, but how Doki Doki Literature Club makes a twist of Danganronpa V3 much less impactful due to personal reasons people most likely won't relate to due to only coming around because of a very specific set of circumstances isn't exactly memorable, is it? Before we get into the video though, here's a few spoiler warnings. I'm going to be spoiling all of Doki Doki Literature Club, but for Danganronpa V3 I'll only be spoiling the big twist at the end of the game. The class trials themselves, the identity of the mastermind, and the ultimate fate of the cast won't be touched on. Also, if you don't like hearing about suicide, depression, or analysis based on incredibly subjective things like personal experience, you might want to click out of this video just to be safe. If you're fine with those spoilers and topics, then let's get into what the video is really about. I think Danganronpa V3 is a better game than Doki Doki Literature Club overall. The characters are better, the presentation is nicer, and the ending is stronger, but Danganronpa V3's twist itself kind of fell flat. Then, after I played Doki Doki Literature Club, there was no way that Danganronpa V3 could convince me that its characters are real, but it's for reasons that are kind of specific to me. To be clear, when I say real, I'm not talking about whether a character is realistic or not. I've cherry-picked a whole bunch of other criteria to use to support my argument. I'm talking about things other than that. Could this character actually exist within our reality? How much can you relate to them? Do they affect anything outside of the instance of the running game? Actually, yeah, I guess I have cherry-picked it a little bit. Let's just get started by talking about Danganronpa V3's twist. For those that don't remember, the twist reveals to the cast that they're in a game show based on Danganronpa, which is fictional in that game's universe. Hooray for narrative shenanigans. And the mastermind refers to the cast as fake because their previous memories were overwritten with fake ones. Now, in the context of the story, the cast is real. Even if their memories are faked, in universe they still have bodies at the very least. These characters are more akin to really good actors. Even if the character they're playing is fake, they're still human underneath it all. But the game uses this fact to tell you that you're a monster for liking Danganronpa. It even says the audience is the true mastermind. It berates you for being responsible for the deaths of real people. And maybe that would have been more effective if the characters weren't fake. And yeah, I know I just said that the characters were real, but it's a little more complicated than that. In order to make it a little easier to explain, I've prepared for you the handy-dandy Swelliot narrative chart. These characters may be real in the context of the story, and I wish Kaede were real. God, I want Kaede to be real so fucking bad. But outside of the narrative, they're fake. As fictional can be. And that's just because, well, they're in a work of fiction. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. The characters are also intangible, and by that I mean, they exist solely within Danganronpa V3. Whenever you boot up the game, they're brought into existence on your screen. Whenever you close the game, they're erased from existence. And the game never affects anything outside of the instance of the game that's running. Nothing in the real world changes as a result of you playing Danganronpa V3. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but if you're going to try and convince me that your characters are real, you might want to do a little more than tell me that they're real. So, let's add a big fat stinking knot to the tangibility room. Finally, I think the characters in Danganronpa V3 are better, but the fact of the matter is that they aren't as relatable. No one is going to play through this and think, ah yes, that's exactly how it went in my killing game. Even if you feel empathy for what the characters are going through, there's always going to be more of a disconnect compared to something grounded in reality, because you aren't able to totally relate to the premise. This is probably the weakest criteria for keeping it real, but it's still something we should keep in mind. Overall, I thought Danganronpa V3's ending and characters were good, but the twist itself didn't factor into any of this. It was just like, oh, that's cool, I guess. I believe that the cast was real in the context of the story, but since the game didn't give me a reason to think that they were anything more than game characters, I didn't think they were anything more than game characters. And so the twist fell flat. Doki Doki Literature Club is the opposite of Danganronpa V3. I didn't really care about the characters, and I think it's a worse game overall, but despite the characters not being real in universe, it did way more to convince me that they were real than Danganronpa V3 did, even if some of that is related to personal reasons. In Doki Doki Literature Club, there's a character named Sayori. For those of you who don't know about the game and click through despite the spoiler warning, first of all, why would you do that? She acts cheerful all the time but is secretly depressed and suicidal, and eventually kills herself. The thing is, my reaction to Sayori was probably the exact opposite of what the developers intended. Without going into detail, it's reminiscent of things that have happened to me personally, and while that helped me relate to it a lot more, I could still never shake the feeling that it was fake in comparison. And the game's presentation only added to this. Up until Sayori's death, the game is framed as a generic visual novel with very little flair. It's hard to get the impression that Sayori is a real character saying real things, when she uses the same 5 sad sprites on loop, as the text scrolls the way it always has, as the same sad music that's used in every single sad scene plays, in front of backgrounds that'll be reused again and again. Danganronpa V3 is much better at this. It at least moves the sprites sometimes, and it has various other effects to punctuate certain lines. Hell, when I was looking through the sprites of this game to prepare for this video, I realized that Danganronpa V3 sprites are complete drawings, while Doki Doki Literature Clubs are built out of mixing and matching other parts of images. Instead of being conceptualized as a whole character, like in Danganronpa V3, Doki Doki Literature Club's characters are conceptualized as pieces of a character, to be assembled for whatever the author needs. Yeah, okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but it fits with what I felt while I was playing. It felt robotic, like they could program Sayori to say anything, instead of her being an actual person. But all of this would have been fine, if we spent more than 2 conversations hearing about any of this. You know why I like Danganronpa V3's characters more? I got to spend more time with them. If Sayori was more fleshed out, like if she had an actual root, for example, I'm sure I could have seen past all of the evidence for her being fake. But I'll never know, because she's so quickly taken out of the picture and thrown away to start the kooky spooks. Then you get to the end of the game, where Monica reveals that everyone in the game is a character in a video game. I mean, yeah, of course that's true, but in universe, they're in a video game. In the context of the story, the cast is a bunch of data, programmed to act in a certain way. In other words, they're fake as hell. To which I went, oh. Wait, was that intentional? And that's when my view on all of it shifted. Sayori felt programmed to me because she was literally programmed, and Sayori feeling fake wasn't as bad anymore because she was intended to be fake. Both in universe and out, Sayori is a fictional character. Hold on, guy, what did you write in the script? Wait, we really don't need to go that in-depth about pataphysics.
First of all, it's not pataphysics, it's narrativics. And secondly, yes you do. I even drew this thing on the whiteboard to help you explain the narrative sandwich.
No, Guy, I'm serious. You want to add extra time to a video that's already pretty long.
But if we don't explain the narrative sandwich, how am I going to justify talking about my origin story?
I fully intend on not talking about that. Why do you even want to talk about it in the first place?
Remember the plan to build an overarching narrative to gain YouTube popularity? This is phase 1. Besides, who wouldn't want to hear about my origin story?
Look, you've appeared in one video of mine. As a minor character, I don't think anyone is clamoring for a some guy origin story. Look, how about you make like the script for the next video and stop talking? And be inanimate. And go get written by you. By which I mean, some guy writes the script, not the script writes itself. I don't even need this frickin' whiteboard. Sayori and friends aren't real, inside the narrative or out, so we can fill in those entries in the table. On the subject of relatability, this is something that Doki Doki Literature Club wins, at least for me. People are much more likely to relate or empathize to the story of Sayori, Yuri, or Natsuki in comparison to the story of Danganronpa V3's cast. You're much more likely to encounter someone dealing with depression, self-harm, or family issues, or even go through these things yourself, than you are to get trapped in a school and forced to murder anime characters. Yes, the Danganronpa V3 cast do deal with issues that are more grounded in reality, but the only reason that any of these stories are being told is because of the killing game, something that only happens in a work of fiction. And all of these issues are only amplified because of that killing game. Even if the Danganronpa V3 cast have problems that are grounded in reality, there's still that level of separation. Doki Doki Literature Club, on the other hand, presents these problems as things that can happen to basically everyone. You know, before all of the scares and stuff happen. Again, this is all very subjective, and maybe all of it only ever applies to me. But that's what this whole video is about. How my personal experiences made me think less of one aspect of Danganronpa V3's ending. Wow, could I get any more pointlessly specific? So what about the tangibility thing? Well, in universe, all the characters in Doki Doki Literature Club are represented by character files. The game actually deletes these files as you progress to show that the character is dead and not coming back. Despite these characters being fictional both in universe and out, the character files are still kind of like their bodies, at least in the narrative. The file being deleted and modified, even if it's created by the game and intended to be manipulated like that, is still an actual action being taken on an object outside the game as it runs, even if that object is just a file. So in some senses, the characters in Doki Doki Literature Club, while they aren't real people, are still actually kinda tangible. And with that, the charter's done. But what does it even mean? Well, let's unpack it a bit, shall we? Danganronpa V3's characters are touted as real in-game, but the game never gave me much of a reason to think so. Doki Doki Literature Club's cast is double fake, but it gave me more of a reason to think that they were real. In between making me relate more, despite that relying on my past experiences, and having something happen outside of the running instance of the game, Doki Doki Literature Club did a lot more to convince me that the cast was real, as opposed to just saying that it was, like in Danganronpa V3. To put it even more simply, Danganronpa V3's twist fell flat, because it couldn't convince me that these characters are real, when these fake ones did more to convince me than they ever could. Actually, the real meaning of the chart is please stop downloading so much Kaede fan art. And now that we've got all that preamble out of the way, it's time to talk about some guy's origin story. Oh, cheese and fucking crackers.
Alright, so here's my origin story. One day I was sitting around, minding my own business, when suddenly, don't shoot! I'm allergic to silver plastic!
Huh. Really? Good to know. Look, you can't keep trying to interrupt with your origin story when it's not even relevant to the video.
It has to do with how I became a real boy. How is that not relevant?
Wait, it actually is relevant? I don't know, man. I haven't read it. Look, up until now, this video was 2,000 words. How many are left? 6,000! Guy, I am not editing around you talking about your origin story for another 30 minutes!
Wait, you didn't know that? Are you seriously telling me that you recorded this whole script without reading any of it beforehand? Why didn't you do that? You could have edited all of this out!
You know what? That's a good point, Guy. I knew there was a reason that I kept you around for reasons that weren't script writing.
It was to tell my origin story, right?
No origin stories on this channel. Ever. Got it?
Fine. So one day I was,